So everybody has minimum security requirements. So what are they? Think about your minimum security requirements. They could be different for different organizations. They may be different in your personal life compared to, say, what they are in an enterprise setting. Password protection, password complexity, for example, password age, minimum password length, right? Could be a security requirement. Encryption for data at rest, encryption for data in transit. Different controls that we have, different policies that we have. Do we have an acceptable use policy? Do we have a security policy? Do we have a password policy, a remote access policy? Tons of security requirements that we can think of. But what's the minimum? What is that baseline that we could set? Again, that's up to you, and it's going to be up to your organization. So what we want to do is make a list of the requirements of what's required and then tie the security requirements to them. So see what the minimum is, see what our security requirements are, and tie those two things together. And that should give us at least the minimum security requirements. Hopefully we're going above and beyond that. Depends on your minimum security requirements, I guess. Then we have service level requirements, an SLR. Now the service level requirements document contains the requirements for a service from the client viewpoint. So what it does is defines detailed service level targets, mutual responsibilities of what the service provider is responsible for and what the customer is responsible for and what the expectations are, and any other requirements specific to a certain group of customers. So it contains the requirements of the IT service from the client viewpoint. So how let's say I'm a client and I have a service provider, how I see what should be going on. Now, a couple times I've mentioned an SLA, service level agreement. This is the beginning of an SLA. This becomes the draft for our service level agreement, the service level requirements. So again, SLR from the client viewpoint. And then training and awareness. Probably one of my biggest pet peeves since I've been in IT, or at least in security when it comes to IT. So we have to think about the appropriate levels and periodic reviews. So for user education and awareness. Now, before we dive into training, we have to think of your audience. Just like about when I talked about reporting. And I said, depending on your audience, you may write a more technical report. You may write a more generalized report. So we have to know who it is we are training. Are we training business users, technical staff, management? Because each audience, they have different outlooks on the business, on the organization, and how it pertains to them. So if you're talking about encryption and you're talking about tunneling and remote access, but these management staff, they don't do any of this and they don't understand what you're talking about, you're not going to have effective training. That could be more geared towards the technical staff. Management and business users, they need the tools, but they don't necessarily need the know-how. They know they need to click here to digitally sign something. That's all they know. They don't need to know that it's being signed with a private key and that gives non-repudiation. And the other end knows that it came from them now because they can't deny. They don't need to know or really need to understand why. They just need to understand how. So each audience group, they have different outlooks. The way they see the business, how it evolves around them and what they do in their business processes. They have different skill sets. So they're all going to need to be educated a little differently. Could be the same topic, right? Like digital signatures again. Technical staff. We may talk about private keys. We may even talk about PKI and non-repudiation. But when it comes to digital signatures for everybody else, they don't need to know the why or the how or how it works. They just need to know how to do it, where to click. Maybe a little bit of why. Say, well, this protects you and them because now they know it came from you and it's not an illegitimate email. All you need to say. That should be good enough for them. If they want to know more, you can tell them more. Absolutely. But I'm willing to bet the whole audience won't want to know more about the technical aspect of it. So what's a good starting point of training for an organization? Policies. Security policies. Because we've all seen them once already being in an organization. That's probably there in your welcome packet or your HR packet that you're going to get when you first get hired on. Remember, we talked about user training and awareness training. We have to revisit that every once in a while. Don't rely on that packet they got 5 years ago that they signed that they probably didn't even read in the first place. We have to keep educating them on our policies, on what to do. So security policies and policies in general is a great place to start for user education and awareness. Now, what we decide on what we're going to deliver and who we're delivering it to, now we need to think about how we're going to deliver this. Are we going to do seminars? Are we going to stand up in front of everybody and have conference meetings? Are we going to do a lunch and learn? Provide lunch. Come in here and sit for 50 minutes, listen to this about our new password policy. So they can brown bag it while you're up front on the whiteboard, for example. To do computer-based learning, right, where you can have this information out there, kind of like what you're doing right now, have it recorded, and you can watch it on a computer or a tablet. And you can hear the seminar or the lesson. We could have intranet sites. Maybe we have printed documentation out there on our intranet, internal to our employees, so they can read updated policies, read, updated news or something like that. Whatever you want to stick out there on your intranet site. You could put videos on demand. All right, those could be on your intranet too, but these are previously recorded sessions. So maybe a consultant came in, did a lunch and learn. You all are eating. We have a consultant up front telling us about the latest social engineering attacks and what we need to be mindful of and pay attention to. Well, somebody was recording that seminar and they stuck it on the company file server or stuck it on our intranet. So now you can go at your leisure and look at that video, watch that video. So different ways to deliver trainings. We could have webinars, maybe people telework. So you can have a consultant or an internal trainer do webcams, use whiteboards, visual learning, or virtual learning, So different ways we could deliver that training. This as long as we get that message out to our employees and our end users of how important this is. So what are we going to try and cover first? User habits is a good one to look at first. Like password behavior, right? We've been harping on our end users for years and years and years about password behavior, strong passwords and keeping it secret. Stop putting it on a Post-it note and hanging it on your monitor or putting it under your keyboard or putting it in the top drawer. Not safe locations. It doesn't take an attacker long, if they have physical access, to turn your keyboard over and see your password. Data handling, or the lack of data handling. We might want to talk to them about encryption. How important it is to encrypt your data while it's at rest. If somebody was to come and take your laptop off your desk and you were logged in already, is the data going to be accessible? If you weren't logged in, is it going to be accessible? If somebody took your phone, is that data going to be accessible? Did you encrypt your phone? Did you encrypt your hard drive? Did you encrypt just sensitive files? Data destruction. How are we deleting that data? Is it really being deleted? Is it being wiped? What about equipment? Right? You don't need a hard drive anymore. What did you do with it? Just toss it in the trash? Hope not. What types of devices to use or what types of devices not to use? Don't bring your mobile phones to work. This is not BYOD. Don't bring your own device. It's not secure. It's not allowed. We have a policy for that. It's not allowed on our network. It's not allowed on our wireless. It's not secure. You're introducing a vulnerability. Clean desk policies. Don't leave sensitive data laying around. I don't know how many times I've seen this in a couple jobs where managers you can't even see the top of their desk. Maybe it makes them think they look busier. I don't know. But you'll see sensitive data, like who's getting a raise, what upcoming jobs do we have, things like that. Sensitive data doesn't need to be laying around on a manager's desk. And I'm not saying you're going in there and you're trying to, eavesdrop or anything or do any shoulder surfing. You're just walking by and you can see stuff. Tailgating. Talked about this a lot, right? Somebody just walking in behind you to bypass physical security. We need to let people be aware of this. This happens more times than you would think. And like I said just a second ago, BYOD, bring in your own devices. Does your organization allow them in the first place? If it does, that's a whole nother can of worms as far as who's responsible for that device now, who's going to secure it, who's going to patch all the vulnerabilities, who's responsible for the data on that device, what happens if the device gets stolen, do we have remote wipe, do we have tracking, does that violate privacy because that's my own device, but now you have tracking on there, so when I'm at the mall on the weekend, are you violating my privacy by tracking me? Well, but that belongs in the company because it's got company data. So, yeah, a lot of gray areas there that you'd have to think about when it comes to bringing your own device. Talk about new threats and security trends of what's going on. Talk about the latest and greatest out there. Do we have the latest phishing attacks? Usually, a company gets compromised. You'll see it in the news, right? Company XYZ loses a million customers' data. PII, credit card numbers, addresses, cell phone numbers, names. Here's free credit counseling. They're going to give all that to you. Phishing attacks are very popular after something like that happens because they're going to target everybody. Company gets hacked. So now I can formulate a phishing attempt and say, dear customer, and you're probably aware of the recent data breach that we've had to our organization. We want to make sure your data is protected and safe. Please click on this link to update your information to the latest data so we can make sure you are secure. Sincerely, blah, blah, blah. Sounds kind of legit, and that was just off the cuff. But if you're getting inundated with this, company XYZ's been hacked, company XYZ's been hacked, and you go or do business with company XYZ, and you get an email like that, you may not think straight. Again, we're playing off of people's trust, people's unawareness, if that's a word, of what's going on, and to not click on that link. Talk about the trends for attackers nowadays, like social engineering. Talking to you, just trying to elicit information. Malwares, the latest malwares out there. Ransomwares. The use of social networking in peer-to-peer networking. We want to make sure we train on awareness and dangers of social media, like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Kik. There's so many out there, I can't name them all off. All right, we have tons of social networking sites out there. Don't share too much information. Don't post every update of where you are. If you go on vacation, yeah, we like to show our friends vacation pictures. Show them when you get back. Right? If you're leaving your house for a week, don't post every day you're gone because now somebody knows you're not home. That's not hard to find online, right? Don't take all kind of pictures. Don't share too much information about yourself. That's just opening yourself up to vulnerabilities, opening yourself up to risks. The more information I can find out about you, the more I can formulate, say, a social engineering attempt. Because if I know what you like to do or where you like to go hang out or, play golf or go fishing or go camping or play sports, I can target my attack on that. If I know you belong to certain organizations or clubs, I can target my attack on that. If I know you go to work and your wife or your spouse goes to work at a certain time, I can target my attack on that. Just be careful not to share too much information. Point-to-point or peer-to-peer sites can transmit viruses and malware like wildfire. Shouldn't be using them anyway. There are legit uses, but it's not safe. Okay, most of the time it's not legit uses, and again, you're committing a computer crime. So what you're downloading could be against the law. Not only could you be getting infected with malware, spyware, somebody's trying to steal your identity, steal your data, steal your stuff, you may be breaking a law all at the same time. So not only are you going to get infected, now you're doing bad. So it's kind of a double whammy. So peer-to-peer websites or sharing sites or peer-to-peer applications, the software itself, where you can connect to other systems, all right, it's just a bad idea in general. So again, that's user education and awareness. Let them know not to do that stuff. Let them know about the new network threats and security trends, again, so they can stay on top of it. That's that whole awareness. Let them know what's going on so they can stay protected, and in turn, that's going to leave your organization protected as well. So some other topics you could talk about. Social engineering, like we said. You could talk about business continuity, right? Keep it at a high level, perhaps, but what are you going to do if a problem does occur? How are we going to get the businesses back up? That could be like a refresher for your team, right? Business continuity, we have roles and responsibilities of who does what. So bring those particular people in with those roles and again, go over their responsibilities. Just kind of keep them on their toes. Could do the same thing for disaster recovery. Bring in your IT team or your folks for your disaster recovery. Go over their roles, go over their responsibilities. Talk about emergency management, doing like hazardous materials, biohazards, security incident response. Bring in your incident team. Again, go over just a little awareness training, and I'm not saying all day seminars. Do it at lunch. Go down through the team. Say, okay, if this happens, what are you going to do? What are you doing? What are you doing? Outstanding. Make sure everybody remembers. Kind of keep them on their toes. You could talk about risk assessment and data classifications, the importance of each. Let them know, hey, we're getting ready to do a risk assessment. So if you see people walking around in your area, we know you're conscious of that because of user awareness. Thank you. But it's okay. They're there doing a risk analysis for us to make our organization and strengthen stronger and make our security posture stronger. So data classifications, talk about that. Information labeling and handling, right? Why do we have these in place? Let them know. Sometimes people just do things and don't ask questions. Maybe because they're too afraid to ask the questions or they don't know the right questions to ask. They know something's burning back there, and why does this always say it's just confidential? What's so confidential about this? Let them know. Talk about personnel security, safety and soundness, physical security. What about appropriate computing resource use? It's a pretty big one. What is allowable and what's not allowable? Go through scenarios. Could be scenario-based. Say, well, you're at lunch. You're sitting at your desk. Is it acceptable to get on social media? Is it acceptable to get on Facebook? Let's see what everybody says. And say, well, according to our policy, and show them the policy, you're not allowed to get on any social networking sites while here at work. It's against our policy. So now they know. And you don't have to go to somebody's desk and call them out, right? You're just, again, making them aware, just a little refresher. Talk about accidents, errors, or omissions as well. So tons of topics that you can talk about when it comes to education and awareness for security. So we got done with the training, right? It went well, or you feel like it went well. Everybody was responsive. They really enjoyed the lunch, though, right? So now what? What's going on? Well, get some training metrics. See how well you did on your training, right? Have a way of measuring that. How well did they listen? How well did they understand what you were putting out? Was it too technical? Did you just talk at a level that was beyond them because you just got excited, you got into it, and you just started rattling off and you were going and you felt good about it? But you didn't realize you were talking up here when they were understanding down here. It happens. I've been there. I do that more times than I care to admit because I just get caught up when I'm doing it. It happens. But you got to have these metrics in place, right? Like evaluation forms. How did you feel about this training? Was there something that we covered that you really liked? Was there something else that you would like to have seen covered? Did you, I flat out ask them, did you understand the material that was presented? Another training metric you could have, let's say you do an awareness training and you talk about phishing email attempts and you have the whole lunch meeting about it and you talk about it for 30, 45 minutes, answer some questions at the end and move on. But then a week later, you formulate a phishing email and you blast it out to the company. You could have tracking mechanisms on there to see who clicks on the link in the phishing email. And if you get a high number, then you probably weren't very successful in your training. If you get a lower number, then you could probably, attaboy, give yourself a pat on the back because they did listen or you did explain it enough where they know not to click on those phishing email attempts. And then depending on what kind of results you get back, you may need to reintroduce that topic. You may need to think of another way or different way of explaining the same topic, but maybe you need to come down on a level, or maybe you need to put a little more inflection in your voice. Maybe people are falling asleep. Either way, or any way you look at it, you're going to have to go back and revisit the training because that metric says that you were not successful. If 50% of the people click on that link, I would say that was an unsuccessful training. So we would have to take those metrics and figure out a way to reintroduce that education or give that training again. And then always follow up, right? Week later, is there anything else that I can help you with? Do you have any questions for me now that you've had a couple days to think about this? Is there anything that I can help you with? You can go to the desk. You can send out an email. Put it up on an intranet site or something like that, a feedback site. So there's different ways that we could follow up and collect these metrics. So that does it for domain 1, right? So we're all done with domain 1. We talked about the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We talked about that security governance and keeping things in line with our business practices. The compliance, so we keeping our company in compliance with local, federal, state regulations and laws. Led into the legal and regulatory issues. Talked about the professional ethics and the ethics that we need to follow for becoming a CISSP. We talked a lot about security policies, our business continuity plans. Remember, we talked about the business impact analysis as well. Talked about the personnel security policies, risk management concepts, the threat modeling, and looked at the different types of threats that we could have, our acquisition strategy, and then finally, our training and awareness.